Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to get a little uncomfortable.
I think that's fair to say.
I want to start with a scenario that I think every single person listening has gone through, whether you want to admit it or not. So picture this. It's a Tuesday. A major project has just gone completely off the rails.
Yep. Been there.
The client's unhappy, or maybe the metrics are just tanking. What is that very first thought that pops into your head?
If we're being really honest, it's usually who messed this up.
Right. It's an instinct. We look at the window. We look at the team. We look at the market, the strategy document.
Any external variable.
Exactly. We search for the external thing that caused the pain. But today we're looking at a source that says that very instinct, that urge to look out the window, is the primary reason leaders fail.
We're talking about The Helpful Leader by James Oyola, and we're diving into Chapter 3 specifically. And you're right, it is not a comfortable read.
Not at all.
The chapter's called Self-Awareness and Personal Growth, which, sounds like standard HR fluff on the surface.
Yeah.
But Oyola really takes a scalpel to the whole concept of leadership.
It's less HR fluff and more like a psychological intervention. I mean, the core thesis here is that effective leadership doesn't start with a quarterly projection or some brilliant strategic pivot.
Yeah.
It starts with what Oyola calls soul health. And I have to admit, when I first read that phrase, I kind of rolled my eyes a little. It sounds so soft.
It does. But as you get into the text, you realize he's talking about something very, very concrete. Operational risk.
That's the critical reframe, isn't it? We tend to think of this soul health stuff or, internal well-being as a luxury.
Something you worry about after you're profitable.
Right. But Oyola argues the complete opposite. He says that internal soul health is the prerequisite for external success. If the leader is internally chaotic, the organization will eventually follow.
You just can't separate the two.
He argues you can't compartmentalize. And I think a lot of us operate on that old stoic leader model, the idea that we can leave our personal baggage at the door, put on the game face, and just lead.
But he says that's a total myth.
A complete myth. The baggage doesn't stay at the door. It just sneaks right into the conference room with you.
It creates a debt. And that debt always, always comes due.
So for this deep dive, we're going to unpack 3 specific areas where this internal debt really shows up. We're going to look at the golden rule of introspection.
Which is much harder than it sounds.
Oh, yeah. Then we're going to do a safety inspection on work ethic. And this is the part that really got my attention.
Mine too. And finally, we'll talk about the difference between reacting and responding.
Because on paper, they can look almost identical. But in terms of leadership impact, they are. Well, they're polar opposites.
Completely.
So let's start with the foundation. The chapter opens with what Oyola calls leadership rule number 22. The best inspection is introspection.
It's a catchy phrase for sure. But let's stress test it a bit. In business, we love inspection. We inspect code, we audit financials, we review supply chains.
We love data, things we can measure.
Right. And introspection is, well, it's inherently subjective. It feels a little squishy. So why does Oyola put it above everything else?
Well, the text frames it as a courageous examination, and I think that word courageous is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there.
It really is.
It implies that what you're going to find isn't always going to be pretty. If I'm inspecting a supply chain, I might find a delay. If I'm inspecting myself, I might find that I'm the bottleneck.
Exactly. And that is precisely why it takes courage. Oyola breaks this down into 3 specific buckets: biases, strengths, and weaknesses.
And most leaders are totally fine with the strengths part, right? We love knowing what we're good at.
Of course. But the biases part, that's where the real operational risk is hiding.
Let's dig into that for a second. When we say bias here, we're not just talking about prejudice in the, socio-political sense, though that's certainly part of it.
No, it's much broader.
We're talking about cognitive biases that can just totally skew your decision-making. For example, a leader might have a bias for action.
Oh, that's a classic one. A leader with a bias for action just feels anxious when things are still. They equate motion with progress.
Right.
So without introspection, they might look at a team that's being thoughtful and planning and just think they're being lazy.
So they jump in.
They intervene, they force a premature launch, and they break the product.
Yeah.
And the leader thinks they just saved the day with all their energy. But what really happened is their unexamined anxiety caused a failure.
That's the key. It's the unexamined part. If that same leader practiced Rule 22, They might pause and realize, okay, I'm feeling a really strong urge to intervene right now. Is that because the project is actually stalled, or is it because I am just uncomfortable with the silence?
And that pause,
Yeah.
that tiny moment of self-audit,
Mm,
that's what saves the project.
yeah.
The text also links us directly to empathy. Introspection breaks down that barrier between boss and employee. Well, when a leader is honest about their own cracks, their own struggles with focus or stress or imposter syndrome, they stop seeing their team as machines that are malfunctioning.
And start seeing them as humans who are struggling.
Exactly. It changes the whole culture. He talks about the cultural impact of this. If the leader pretends to be this fortress of perfection,
Then everyone else has to wear armor too.
it creates a culture of hiding. If the CEO never admits, I don't know, or you know what, I reacted poorly yesterday, then a junior developer is certainly not going to admit there's a bug in the code until it's way too late.
But if the leader models it, if they actually say their self-corrections out loud, it gives the whole organization permission to focus on getting better instead of just managing their image.
So Rule 22 isn't about, meditating on a cushion.
No, it's about risk mitigation. It's checking the structural integrity of the bridge before you drive the whole company over it.
Precisely. And if introspection is the structural check, then the next part of the chapter really focuses on the engine. And this is where I think Oyola completely disrupts a lot of standard business advice.
Let's talk about work ethic.
Yes.
This was the part of the chapter that just made me stop and reread the whole page. I mean, in almost every industry, work ethic is the ultimate compliment.
It's a badge of honor.
If you tell someone they have an insane work ethic, they'll put it on their LinkedIn profile tomorrow. We celebrate the grind. But Oyola says work ethic requires a safety inspection. Why?
Because work ethic is a behavior. It's not a motive. You can observe someone working 80 hours a week. That's the data point.
Okay.
But why are they doing it? The source distinguishes between two radically different drivers. Let's call them driver A and driver B. So driver A is the one we all want. That's genuine passion. You're working hard because the problem is just fascinating. You believe in the mission. The work itself gives you energy. That's the flow state.
Right. That's sustainable high performance.
Yeah.
But then you've got driver B. And driver B looks identical from the outside. The hours are the same. The output might even be the same, at least at first.
But the fuel source is totally different. Driver B is unresolved trauma and insecurity.
Wow. That is a heavy concept for a leadership book. We're essentially saying that a lot of what we praise as dedication is actually a trauma response.
The text uses a very specific phrase. Dedication can quietly morph into dysfunction. Think about the high performer who is just terrified of failure. Not just, I want to win, but if I lose, I am literally nothing.
So they're running on cortisol and adrenaline.
Constantly. They're working hard not to build something great, but to outrun this deep feeling of inadequacy.
I like the analogy of a runner. You see someone sprinting down the street. If they're training for a marathon, that's healthy. If they're running away from a bear, that's survival. And Oyola is basically suggesting that for a lot of leaders, the bear is inside their own head.
And here's the problem for the organization. A leader running from a bear is dangerous to be around. They can't stop. They can't prioritize.
They usually end up as micromanagers, don't they?
Almost always. If your entire self-worth is tied to everything being perfect, you can't delegate. You can't trust anyone.
So you check every email, you redo other people's work.
And the text warns that this type of work ethic is a dysfunction that's just waiting to happen. It burns out the leader, sure, but even worse, it completely scorches the team.
It's interesting because we often frame imposter syndrome as this purely negative thing that just holds people back.
Right.
But this suggests that for some people, imposter syndrome is actually the engine that's driving them forward right until that engine explodes.
It's a dirty fuel. It produces a lot of power in the short term, but it just ruins the machinery.
Yeah.
And this brings us right back to his central thesis. Internal wholeness precedes external effectiveness.
You can't build a healthy long-term company on the back of your own unresolved insecurity.
It's simply not scalable.
So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, I work hard because I have to, Oyola is challenging you to ask, do I really have to? Or am I just afraid of what happens if I stop?
That's the safety inspection.
Yeah.
And that leads directly to the consequences of not doing that inspection.
Yeah.
The chapter moves into this idea of leaking wounds.
Yeah, that imagery is... It's
It's
visceral. Unexamined wounds inevitably leak. It's kind of gross, but it makes the point perfectly. You can't just seal this stuff off.
You really can't. And the way it leaks is through leadership behavior. This is where the text makes a critical distinction between reacting and responding.
Which, in casual conversation, we use those words interchangeably.
We do. But in this context, they represent two completely different neurological states.
Okay, so break that down for us, because I think a lot of leaders really pride themselves on their reaction time. Being quick on your feet is seen as a virtue.
And being quick is fine. Being reactive is the problem. Reacting, in Oyola's definition, is defensive. It's an emotional reflex that's triggered by those unexamined wounds.
Okay.
Let's go back to our running from the bear leader. Say an employee misses a deadline.
All right, so the leader is already insecure about performance. That missed deadline feels like a direct threat to their safety.
Exactly. So they react, they might yell, they might send a passive-aggressive email at 2 in the morning, they might just take the project away and do it themselves.
The reaction isn't about solving the problem of the deadline.
No, it's about managing the leader's own anxiety. It's a full-on fight-or-flight response to a spreadsheet error.
And the team feels that. They don't see a leader solving a problem. They just see a leader spiraling out of control.
And that absolutely kills psychological safety. Now the team is just walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger the boss's anxiety. So innovation stops. Everyone is just trying to stay safe.
So contrast that with responding. What does that look like in the same scenario?
Well, responding requires that soul health we were talking about. It requires a gap between the stimulus and your action.
Yeah.
The leader sees the missed deadline. They might feel that same initial ping of stress. That's just human. But because they're self-aware, they recognize it. They don't let the stress drive the bus.
So they take a breath. They engage the prefrontal cortex instead of just the amygdala.
Correct. They respond with wisdom. They might ask, okay, why did we miss this? Was the timeline unrealistic from the start? Do you need more resources? How do we fix this for next time?
The focus is on the outcome and the system, not on the leader's ego.
And that shift from who did this to me to how do we solve this is huge. But the argument here is that you literally cannot make that shift consistently if you are full of internal turmoil.
And that's the whole crux of it, isn't it?
It is. You can fake it for a while. You can read all the books on active listening and try to follow the script. But under real pressure, when the stakes are high and you haven't slept, the leak will happen. If you haven't dealt with your triggers, they will eventually pull the trigger for you.
It sounds like stress management isn't just a wellness perk. It's a core leadership discipline. The source mentions that knowing your triggers is like having a map to your own minefield.
I love that metaphor. Because we all have minds. We all have insecurities, biases, bad habits. The helpful leader isn't the one who has somehow removed all the minds. That's impossible.
Right.
The helpful leader is the one who has mapped them. They know, I tend to get defensive when people question my financial projections. So when someone questions the projections, they know to step very carefully.
They can even warn the team something like, hey guys, I'm a little stressed about these numbers, so if I seem intense, just know that's on me, not you.
That is the ultimate example of responding with wisdom. It just diffuses the tension before it can even start.
This has been a pretty intense deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but it really all centers on this idea that the mirror is more important than the window. We started with Rule 22. The best inspection is introspection. It's about auditing your biases before they turn into bad decisions.
Then we looked at the safety inspection of work ethic. And we really have to stop assuming that all hard work is healthy work. We had to distinguish between the passion of driver A and the trauma response of driver B.
Because if you're leading from a place of trauma, you're just building a house of cards.
Absolutely.
And finally, we landed on the mechanism of failure. The leak. Unhealed wounds leak into our leadership as reactivity. And the goal is to heal enough, to have enough soul health, that you can move from reacting to responding.
It really challenges the very definition of a leader's job. We think the job is to manage the P&L, manage the product, manage the people, but Oyola suggests the primary job is to manage yourself.
And if you get that right,
The rest becomes infinitely easier to handle.
it's a sobering thought, especially for all the high achievers listening. I mean, we often use our work to avoid looking at ourselves. It's easier to fix a company than to fix a soul.
It is. But fixing the soul is the only way to make sure the company stays fixed.
So I want to leave you with the final thought to chew on. We talked about how dedication can actually be dysfunction in disguise. I want you to look around your industry. Look at the icons, the people on the magazine covers, the ones who claim they never sleep. We idolize them.
We do. We call them visionaries.
But based on Chapter 3 of The Helpful Leader, I have to wonder, how many of those empires are actually powered by unexamined trauma? And more importantly, if you're looking in the mirror right now, what is powering yours? Is it passion, or are you just running from a bear?
That's the question that determines whether you burn out or burn bright.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.